Hello and welcome to this screencast on how to create a Android application using the new Google Maps Android API v2. So for this screencast we will be using the Eclipse Android Developers Tools plugin where we will be creating our application in. So we will start by creating a new Android application project. We'll call it the Google Maps Skeleton project. The minimum required SDK will be set to API level 11, Honeycomb, to begin with. And this is because this is the first API level that introduced fragments. So from API level 11 and onwards, we have native fragment support. And later on in the screencast, I will show you how to modify the application so that it also works on lower level SDK levels. So we'll keep the defaults for the Android project here until we hit the finish button. And our project will be created in the Android Developer Tools. The new Google Maps API for Android v2 has a big dependency on GooglePlayServices. So GooglePlayServices is basically a way for Google to bring new features to the Android platform, to existing Android platforms such as Google Maps, Google Plus, location APIs, and many, many more. It allows Google to add additional functionality to existing Android platforms, so they can basically roll out new APIs, new features on existing Android platforms, going back up until Froyo. So if you install the Android SDK and you start the Android SDK Manager, you will see in the Extras folder that there is an entry for Google Play Services. I believe it's not installed by default, but you can install it real easy using the Android SDK Manager. And it will be deployed on your file system somewhere here. So this is where I installed the Android Developers Tools bundle. The SDK is also installed there, and under Extras, Google Play Services, we have the Google Play Services distribution, including documentation, the library project, and some sample apps. Now, what we need to do first is we need to import the Google Play Services library project into our IDE. So I will do an import of existing Android code into the workspace. I am going to copy this path here, hit browse, and continue onwards until I hit the library project, which is located here. The name is okay for me, so I'll finish the import. And as you can see, the Google Play Services library project has now been installed, and I can create a reference to it from my skeleton project by loading up the project properties, clicking on Android, looking down here at the library section, and adding Google Play Services as a library. So this is the basic setup that needs to be done before you can add a map on your application. So in this section I'm going to show you how you can create an API key for the Google Maps Android API v2 for your Android application. So in order to create an API key, you need to navigate to the Google APIs console, which is available at code.google.com/apis/console. And I'm going to start by creating a new project for our application. So I go into this menu, hit create. I'm going to call this the Google Maps Skeleton project. So the project will be created now in the Google APIs. I will be presented with a list of services here that I can enable. So obviously I'm interested in the Google Maps Android API v2. So I'm going to enable this API here. And then I'm going to navigate to the API access menu where I can create a new Android key. Now, here's where it becomes a little bit tricky for most people. So the thing is that in order to create an Android key for your Maps application, you need to provide two things as input. So the first thing we need is we need the certificate fingerprint of our key store, and we need the package name of our application. So where can we find those two sets of data? Well, the certificate fingerprints can be retrieved fairly easily using Eclipse. So if we go to the Eclipse preferences, go to Android build, you can copy paste the certificate fingerprint of the debug key store, which is the key store that is used by the IDE if you test your applications on actual devices. So we'll just copy paste the fingerprint and we'll paste it in our API console. The second thing we need is the package name. Now the package name of our application can be found in the manifest. So if you take a look at the manifest here, you should have a package name. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to separate the fingerprint and the package name with the semicolon. And I'm going to hit create. You should get a notification here that the Android key was created successfully. And you will find the API key in this window here. So now that we've retrieved an API key from the API console, we'll need to add it to our manifest. So the API key is put underneath the application tag in our Android manifest, and we're using this metadata Android name called com.google.android.maps.v2.api key. The value being the API key, which is shown here in the API console. So this sets up our API key for the Google Maps v2 API, but in order to run the maps on your application, you need a whole bunch of permissions in your manifest. So I'm just going to copy them here from the GitHub project, and I'm going to paste them here in the manifest. Remove this. So we have a couple of Google Maps related permissions. We have network connectivity based permissions. We have permissions to access Google based web services, external storage for caching the map tiles, and some location based permissions. So once all of these are added to the manifest together with the API key, you're basically good to go. I'm just going to show you this picture where you can see the references between the Google API console, the certificate fingerprint, the application package, and the API key. So now that we've retrieved our API key for Google Maps and we've done the necessary setup in our Android manifest, we can start by adding the Google Map onto our application. So the way that we do that is by adding a fragment to our layout. So I will remove this Hello World text view from our layout, and I will replace it with a fragment, which I'm going to copy paste from the GitHub project here, which has an Android ID map that we will use later on to reference in our activity. And more importantly, it has a name, which is com.google.android.gms.maps.map fragment. Now this is the native maps fragment, which is available in API level 11 and onwards. So this is kind of the native map fragment, which doesn't use the support library that you can use on those API levels. So as soon as we have this in our layout, we should be able to start our application on an actual device. And we should be able to see a Google map popping up on our screen. Now obviously we're not able to interact with the map at this point because we've only added it to our layout. So in order to interact with our Google map, we need to access it from our activity. So the way that we're able to access the Google map component in our activity is by first loading up the fragment which is hosting the map component. So as we're using API level 11, we can call the fragment manager component, giving us a find by fragment ID method, where we will just pass in the ID of our fragment, which is called map. And we're going to store that in a new local variable. I'm going to call this map fragment. Now, although this allows me access to the fragment, it doesn't allow me access to the Google Map component inside the fragment. So in order to get access to the map component, I need to go via a map fragment, which is the native map fragment, which is available on these API levels. So obviously I'll need to add a cast here. And as you can see on the map fragment object, there is a method called getMap, which gives us a reference to the actual Google Map object. Now, what's also important is we need to do a null check here on the Google Map, because under some circumstances this can be null. So once we're sure we have a Google Map, we can interact with it by, for example, setting the My Location Enabled flag to true, allowing the user to see his or her location on the map. So that's basically it in order to get access to the Google Map. So keep into account that this will only work on API level 11 and upwards, because we are using the native fragment manager and the native map fragment component. In the next section, I will show you what you need to change to your application in order to run this on lower API levels. So the way that we've set up our application is that we've specified a minimum SDK version of 11, meaning that our application will obviously only run on Honeycomb and upwards. So what happens if we lower the minimum SDK requirement and set it to, for example, API level 8, which is Froyo? And let's see what we'll need to do in our application to make this run. Now, as you can see, there is immediately an issue that we see in our activity. So we get a warning here saying that, oh, we cannot use the fragment manager because that call requires API level 11, and we're currently setting the minimum SDK level on 8. So we cannot use the fragment manager. Now, through the support library, we can call the fragment manager in a different way using the support fragment manager. Now, the way that we do that is we also need to call this from our activity, but we'll need to change our base activity class by not using activity directly, but using fragment activity. So once we have the fragment activity in place, we can call support fragment manager. Now, we still have an error here that we cannot cast this fragment being returned from the support fragment manager to map fragment. So just as there's a support library equivalent of the fragment manager, there's also a support map fragment available that we can use to target lower level APIs. So this should fix all of the compilation errors. So it's very simple. The two things that were changed here is that instead of extending activity, we're now extending fragment activity. And instead of using the fragment manager, we use the support fragment manager, which returns us a support map fragment instead of an actual map fragment. Everything else remains the same. The only thing that we still need to change is in our layout. So as you can see, we have the fragment here, our map fragment. This still points to the native map fragment, so this will need to change to the support map fragment. So with these changes done to your application, through the help of the support library and also GooglePlayServices, you are now able to run the exact same applications on lower API levels.